Asia, welcome back to my channel Celestial Mind. So today's video I'm really excited about because we're going to be decoding another Netflix original, which you guys know is one of my favorite things to do. I am a video buff, a movie buff. I love decoding movies, and this one had a lot of juice. Which movie am I talking about? I'm talking about We Always Lived in the Castle on Netflix. You guys definitely check it out before you watch this video if you haven't seen it yet. It is such a goodie to decode. So you guys, I'm going to talk to you guys about how this movie on Netflix, essentially, as I decoded it, was about handlers, agents, and spells. Okay, so if that's something that's interesting to you, please thumbs up this video. If you'd like to hear more, let me do more video reviews and movie reviews about Netflix originals and other movies. If you guys have anything to suggest, just leave them down in the comments, and let's go ahead and get started. Sorry, there are planes passing, so if it ever gets kind of hard to hear, that's what's going on. Let's let it pass, give it a moment, let him be known. Okay, we're good. Okay, so like I said, this movie, We Always Lived in Castles, is about handlers, agents, and spells, and I'm gonna break all that down for you. I just want to start by saying that I really did love and enjoy this movie. It was very, like, to the average person, I feel like they'd watch the movie and be like, well, this is kind of dumb, or this doesn't really make sense. But when you're looking at it through your third eye and you're trying to decipher and decode it, there's just so much that it's like, it literally shows us what happens in our regular day-to-day lives in the form of a movie, which all movies do. Okay, I'm gonna stop babbling and get into it. So the first thing I want to talk to you guys about is the spells in the movie. So spells. So there are the characters Mary Cat, Constance, Uncle Julian, and then Cousin Charles, okay? I guess I'll give you guys a quick synopsis of the movie before I break it down. So essentially, We Always Lived in the Castle is about these two sisters, Mary Cat and Constance. They live with their Uncle Julian in this really big, kind of looks like an abandoned mansion, if you will, on the top of the hill. Nobody in the town goes to visit them. In fact, they think that they are witches or something wrong with them. People in the town do not like them, so they keep their distance, okay? So essentially what happens is, one day, Cousin Charles comes to visit the girls, and he decides he's going to live with them. And then we realize that there is a lot of handling going on, and I'll break down what is handling a little bit later in the video. But essentially, Cousin Charles is trying to manipulate Constance into allowing him to stay, allowing him to, you know, replace their father figure of the household, and kind of just manipulate her into basically taking care of him, doing everything he says, what have you. Okay, Mary Cat, the younger sister, realizes this, and she does everything in her power to make him leave. This is where the spells come in, or magic. So there's a lot of oh, this movie is just so juicy. There's a lot of like spells that happen in the movie, and I don't know if you guys peeped that, those of you guys who did watch this movie, but I'm going to break down to you guys in the movie what were some of the spell work, or what was some of the magic that Mary Cat was doing in the movie. So you'll notice that in the movie, Mary Cat, every time she gets upset, she will walk into her secret garden and she will get jars and put things into the jars and then bury the jars. You guys know on my channel I also tell you guys about how to make your own jars, like a new home jar I've done the video on, or a prosperity jar. So this comes from a lot of different backgrounds. There's not one particular religious group or spiritual group that practices this, but the reason why they're using jars is because if you gather certain ingredients and certain materials that hold a certain frequency and you put them all together and bound them inside of a jar, and then what Mary Cat was doing was burying them in sacred ground, what she would consider sacred ground, or like her altar space or her ritual space. She's doing that to try and manipulate the environment around her. So you'll notice that one of the jars that she does, every time she has to go out into the village that everyone hates her, she will go to her garden and check and make sure that her jars are prepared. And so one particular jar that she made was a jar so that the village people would not mess with her, would not really notice her, would not really look at her. So she, in the beginning of the movie, you see her putting together the jar. She's burying the jar. Her sister Constance gives her a coin. She buries the coin into the ground as an offering, you know, saying please activate the jar, or please make sure that the jar is working. And then she goes out into the village, and then you'll notice that no one in the village really bothers her. So then we do notice that later on in the movie, one of the jars breaks and the insides of the jar come out. She notices the jar is kind of messed up, and all the stuff that was inside the jar is out of the jar. And then she goes back into the town and realizes that everyone in the town is saying mean things to her, cursing at her, throwing things at her, being really nasty and malicious because her spell was broken, or the jar was broken. So that is one way in this movie that they do like spells, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if the average person caught that, but that was her doing magic, and I thought that was so cool. Okay, so here is another example of how there were spells or even rituals in this movie. So you'll notice how every time the sister Constance told Mary Cat to go out into this town, she would always grab Mary Cat's hair, braid her hair, and then put a rubber band around it. Now there is a reason why she's doing that. That is another spell or another ritual that she did to try and handle her sister Mary Cat. And I'll get into the handlers and agents talk in just a moment. But yeah, so essentially, when you braid your hair, or when someone braids your hair, it is a spiritual tale that you can braid into your hair intentions, or braid into your hair, you know, like if there's an affirmation like I will be successful, you can braid it into your hair, and now that braid kind of serves that purpose. Just like in the Viking days, they would braid up their hair, you know, with the intention of this is strength, this is my power, this is whatever. Okay, so this is something that's done in history and also in spirituality. Hair is very, 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 very important. So I thought it was really interesting that every time Constance wanted Mary Cat to leave the house, she would braid her hair, and then she would take a rubber band and band the rubber band at the bottom of her hair. You see her doing this several times throughout the movie, which is why I caught that it was significant. And at first I was like, oh, she's just being a sweet sister, she's braiding her hair. But no, they really put an emphasis on her braiding the hair and putting the bands around it. So you have to ask, what kinds of spells were Constance putting on Mary Cat? Because Mary Cat was also putting spells on Constance. So I'll get into that now. So cousin Charles, their cousin, we don't know if it really is or isn't his cousin, but there's this man that comes to their house one day and he's like, hey, I'm your cousin Charles, I'm gonna stay with you for a little bit. And Constance is like, yeah, okay, sure, you're our cousin, you get to stay here. Okay, so Mary Cat did not like that. So Mary Cat started to do her own spells to get rid of cousin Charles. And I hope I'm not giving too much away. Like I said, you have to watch the movie because this video is all kinds of spoilers, but I'm just breaking it down and decoding it for you guys. But yeah, so Mary Cat is doing all kinds of spells on cousin Charles to get him out of the house. You'll see a really big spell that she does on him. One, she breaks off one of his buttons off of his shirt when he's not looking. She puts the button into a jar, as well as a few other things to help to banish him, and then she buries this jar into her little sacred space. Another spell that she does on cousin Charles is whenever she really, really, really wants him to go, she goes into his room, takes a hammer, and breaks a mirror. And there is a reason why it's symbolic, that breaking of something, because that is essentially creating energy, or an energy buildup. Just like later, or another time in the movie, there are people from the village who are actually friends of the family that come into the house, and Mary Cat doesn't want them to come into the house because she's afraid that they're going to take Constance, her sister, away from her. So she goes into the kitchen while they're having tea in the living room, takes the teacup and smashes it into the ground, and they're just like, what did she just do? She was doing magic. And the thing is, that built up I don't want to say calamity, the built up energy, that breaking of energy, you know, that holds a vibration, that holds a frequency, and she uses that frequency to then speak her spell. And I don't know what she says. They will not take constant, they will not take constant. She says something like that. So she breaks the glass, and then she says her, you know, little incantation or whatever. So yeah, there's lots of spell work going on in this movie, but the one that I was talking about is Mary Cat. She breaks the mirror, and then she takes the broken mirror pieces, she puts it into the bed, Uncle Charles's bed. Not Uncle Charles, I'm sorry, Cousin Charles's bed. She also takes his clothes, she rips up his clothes, cuts up his clothes, throws that in the bed. She also takes a jar of water, a bucket of water, she dumps that in the bed, and she's just basically putting like herbs and flowers that she's dug up, throwing it all into the bed. And that is like, instead of making it a jar, it's like a giant spell in the bed that he sleeps in, essentially saying, I don't want him to be here anymore. I'm putting all this stuff here so that he will leave. So yeah, okay, I've talked enough about the spells, but there are definitely some spells going on in this movie. If you guys catch any, or you caught any from watching the movie that I did not mention, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Okay, let's move on to agents and handlers, because I thought this was extremely interesting in this movie. So first, let me explain to you guys what an agent versus a handler is. So a handler, and we all have handlers in our life and may not even realize it or recognize it, but essentially handlers are people that come into your life and they have a particular agenda. Maybe it's that I don't want her to, you know, I don't want her to dig too deep into spirituality. So every time she, you know, is in her room working on something, I'm gonna come and, you know, entertain her or make her forget that she was doing that. And this isn't in the movie, this is just me explaining what like a handler would be. Or let's give an example. Let's say there is this guy, and one day he is, you know, one day he will have the capacity to, I don't know, lead some kind of spiritual war, I don't know, example. So then maybe he will be placed, or there'll be handlers placed around him to kind of deter him from that path, because they know that eventually one day he will have the ability to do something great in the world. Therefore, handlers are placed around you to kind of stop you or hinder you from doing what you are meant to do. Another example, this happens a lot in our society, and I don't think people realize that these are handlers, but let's give an example of, there's a woman in a relationship, and her boyfriend or husband, whoever it is, abuses her really badly, gives her low self-esteem, physically abuses her, physically hurts her, whatever the case may be. He may be a handler in her life because maybe she is destined to become a great doctor and, you know, cure cancer or something. But because he is in her life handling her, basically deterring her from her path by giving her low self-esteem, probably being very controlling and manipulative, telling her you need to stay in the house, you need to do this, you need to do that, that would deter her from eventually becoming a great doctor and curing cancer. He would be considered her handler. Okay, so I think that is really interesting. Like I said, we all have handlers in our life, whether we realize it or not. Another example could just be like, you're just destined to do something great, you're destined to do something good, and you've got friends in your friend groups that are probably up to no good, or they're a negative influence on you, don't have your best interests at heart, and they will persuade or influence you to do things that deter you from being the great version of who you're meant to be. Those people are handlers. So like I said, we all have handlers in our life, whether we realize them to be handlers or not. Sometimes you have to cut off handlers or distance yourself from handlers. Maybe there's a friend that you were friends with in high school that you're no longer friends with. They could have been your handler. Maybe there was somebody that you were dating and they always, you know, kept you away from your friends or kept you away from your family or whoever. They could have been handlers in your life. So once you realize someone could be a handler in your life, you need to get them out of your circle, okay? That's just a side note. And then agents are people who, so this is really interesting. I learned about this from Fleur Brune on YouTube. Go ahead and check her out. Her videos are very, very, very informative. But essentially, agents can be people, but they can also be empty seaters, and I hope my video does not get flagged by saying certain things. So you guys make sure you hit the thumbs up button so that I can continue to speak freely without YouTube tampering with my video. But essentially, Agents are kind of like handlers in the same way that they kind of persuade you or push you to do this or push you to do that. But sometimes agents are silent agents, which means that they just watch you from afar or watch you from a distance. They don't really get involved or interfere or interact with your life. They're just there to see what you do, kind of report on what you do and keep track of what you do. Now, like I said, agents could be real people or they could be empty seaters. Empty seaters just means that they're not a real person. They don't have a real soul, they don't have a real spirit. And some of you guys are like, how can that be? Everybody who is on the planet Earth is a real person. That is not the truth, which is really interesting. But yes, there are fake people, there are empty seaters, there are artificial intelligence, there are different extraterrestrials in human form and in human flesh, and we all just kind of intermingle here on planet Earth. I know I may be sounding crazy to somebody, but this does pertain to the movie, so let's get back to the movie. Okay, so as far as handlers are concerned, as it pertains to We Always Lived in the Castles, so Constance kind of was handling her sister Mary Cat in the sense that she would always do those daily rituals on her to get her out of the house, giving her the coins, braiding up her hair, putting rubber bands around her hair, okay? And Constance kind of acted as if, in the entire movie, she kind of acts as if she's under a spell, because she's just so prim, so proper, perfect housewife, or perfect, you know, perfect sister. I'm gonna make dinner now, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't really show her real emotions. And we know that because there are instances of the movie where they zoom in on her face and you can see like whatever expression is on her face is very much so different than what she's thinking in her mind. There's an example of when Constance is sitting at the dinner table with the family, Mary Cat, cousin Charles, Uncle Julian, and where was I going with this? Okay, yeah. So she's sitting at the table and Mary Cat is being really kind of bad, you know, just shouting out things at the table, kind of being rude to Uncle Charles or cousin Charles or whatever. And she's just kind of sitting there and she's like, "You're so smart, Mary Cat," or "I taught her that," you know, like you just kind of like acquiescing or like kind of dismissing Mary Cat's bad behavior because she just is under some kind of spell. Like, I have to be proper, I'm meant to be proper, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's an example. Another example is, of course, how Mary Cat is putting these spells and incantations on Constance to keep the village people away from her, and that's probably why she acts so prim and proper. It is my opinion that Constance knows that Mary Cat is putting these spells on her or doing these rituals on her, but I feel like she just kind of goes with it at this point. She doesn't really say anything about it. Another example is, let me see, I have notes, let me go down. Okay, Mary Cat to Constance, we already talked about how Mary Cat was putting Constance's belongings in jars and things like that to kind of keep Constance away from the city people. We talked about Constance to Mary Cat, braiding up Mary Cat's hair and putting the rubber bands in it. And then there's also cousin Charles to Constance. So cousin Charles was very much a handler of Constance. Anytime he needed something, he would make her do it. Mary Cat, I'm thirsty, or not Mary Cat, I'm sorry, Constance, I'm thirsty, can you make me something to drink? Constance, I'm hungry, can you get me something to eat? And there was like this scene in the movie where he's just like, Constance, 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 like he just needs her to do all these things, and that keeps her busy and not, you know, doing what she would otherwise be doing, you know? So he was kind of handling her, kind of making her his housewife, even though they're supposedly cousins. I don't know. But yeah, so those are the handlers in the movie. And then as far as agents are concerned, of course, I believe that cousin Charles was an agent. Also, you can consider the town people who came to visit and try and bring Constance back into the village community, because Constance was kind of friends with people in the village community before some kind of big thing happened. They don't really mention what, oh, they kind of mention what happens. Constance was dating a boy in the village and then something happened and they're not together anymore. But yeah, I believe that Mary Cat kind of put a spell or put some kind of veil over the village people to make them forget what really happened. That is just my conclusion with that. But yeah, you guys, I hope that I broke down this as well as I possibly could. There were so many nuggets, so many parts of the movie that I felt were really, really, really exciting and really, really, really good. But you guys have to see this movie. It is kind of like an offbeat movie, so like you'll watch it and be like, this is kind of strange. But like I said, if you look at it through the lenses of agents, handlers, and spells, you will definitely see what is going on. I very much so believe that the writer of this movie or maker of this movie is absolutely either a part of the occult or knows knowledge of the occult, because there is definitely like hidden meaning and hidden knowledge in this movie, and I really want you guys to check it out. So if you thought that this decoding and breakdown was interesting, please give this video a thumbs up, and that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!